Have you ever felt that quiet whisper inside you telling you that life is supposed to be more than what you're living right now? It is not a shout, not a demand, but a gentle nudge that something within you is ready to awaken. That whisper is the call of your spirit, asking you to rise above the noise of the world and step into a deeper version of yourself. Every woman who begins to awaken spiritually feels this pull. It is not always comfortable, but it is always powerful. It shakes the foundation of what you once believed and invites you to look at life with clearer eyes and a stronger heart. The truth is, awakening is not a single event. It is a journey, a continuous unfolding that slowly reveals who you truly are beneath the roles, the expectations, and the fears that society has placed upon you. As you awaken, you begin to see that much of what you carried was never yours to begin with. You realize how much energy was spent on things that drained you, distracted you, or diminished your inner light. And in that realization, something shifts. You begin to release. You begin to let go. Not all at once, not with force, but with gentle courage, one layer at a time. This process is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you have always been before the world told you otherwise. It is about peeling away the masks, the doubts, the false identities, and rediscovering the strength and wisdom already within you. Spiritual awakening is an act of remembrance, of reconnecting with your essence, of stepping into the fullness of your being. And when this happens, life does not remain the same. You see differently, you feel differently, and you choose differently. The path of the spiritually awake woman is not easy, but it is rewarding beyond measure. She learns that her worth does not come from what others think, but from the light she carries within. She learns that peace is not found in pleasing the world, but in aligning with her truth. She learns that strength is not in controlling everything, but in surrendering to a higher flow that always guides her where she needs to be. This is why so many begin to slowly quit the things that hold them back. Not because they are forced to, but because their soul no longer resonates with what once kept them small. If you are listening right now, it is because you feel that same call. Deep down, you know there are habits, fears, and patterns that you are ready to release. And as you continue, you will discover the 7 things spiritually awake women slowly quit to step into their highest power. Each one is a doorway to freedom, a release from the chains of the past, and a step into the life you were always meant to live. Stay with this journey because what you uncover will change you forever. Transformation begins with patience. The woman who awakens spiritually does not rush to strip away everything at once because she understands that true change is not about force, but about steady release. Just as the seasons shift slowly, allowing nature to adjust, her inner seasons also change in their own divine timing. She knows that what is deeply rooted within cannot always be torn out in an instant. It must be unraveled with care, with compassion, and with trust in the process. The power lies not in speed but in consistency. By letting go little by little, she gives herself the space to grow stronger with each step, to heal from what she releases, and to step into the next stage with courage rather than fear. The truth is that most people live trapped by the illusion of quick fixes. They want instant results, immediate breakthroughs, and overnight transformations. But the spiritually awake woman knows that anything gained too quickly rarely lasts. What endures is what is cultivated slowly, with attention, with discipline, and with faith. Each small act of letting go becomes a victory, a silent declaration that she is choosing her soul over her fears, her freedom over her chains. And each victory adds up, creating an unshakable foundation for her future. This is why she does not judge her pace. She does not compare her growth to another's journey. She does not shame herself for still holding on to pieces of the old self. Instead, she honors the rhythm of her soul. She understands that the process of release is sacred, and sacred things take time. With each step, she softens, she expands, she becomes lighter, and even when the change feels invisible in the moment, she trusts that her inner landscape is shifting in ways her eyes cannot yet see. To quit slowly is to honor both strength and vulnerability. It is to say, "I am not rushing to escape myself. I am walking beside myself, hand in hand, guiding every part of me into wholeness." This is how lasting transformation is born, not through pressure, but through presence, not through force, but through faith. She learns that her soul does not respond to harshness. It blooms when treated with gentleness. The reward of moving slowly is depth. While others skim the surface, she goes to the root. She does not just change behaviors, she heals the beliefs that once created them. She does not just quit habits, she rewrites the identity that held onto them. And because of this, her change is not fragile. It cannot be shaken by the opinions of others, nor undone by temporary setbacks. It becomes who she is. Every slow release is a quiet revolution. Every small surrender is a seed planted for a stronger tomorrow. And when she looks back, she will not see failure in the pace of her growth. She will see the beauty of becoming whole, step by step, moment by moment, until her soul shines with nothing left to weigh it down. One of the first chains to break is self-doubt. It hides in the mind like a quiet shadow, whispering that you are not enough, not ready, not worthy of stepping into the power waiting within you. Self-doubt is not always loud. Sometimes it speaks in hesitation, in second guess, in shrinking back when your soul longs to expand. It convinces you to dim your light so others feel comfortable, and it tells you to stay small so you do not risk failing. But when a woman awakens spiritually, she begins to see those whispers for what they are, illusions designed to keep her from discovering the fullness of her strength. The moment she chooses to question self-doubt, everything shifts. Doubt thrives in unquestioned acceptance. It grows when its lies are treated as truth. But the spiritually awake woman begins to notice the difference between the voice of fear and the voice of her intuition. Fear restricts, intuition expands. Fear creates heaviness, intuition creates clarity. She learns to lean into the voice that feels light, that calls her forward, that urges her to trust, even when the path is unclear. And in that trust, self-doubt slowly loses its grip. Confidence does not arrive in a single moment of courage. It is built in layers, just like spiritual awakening. Every time she acts despite doubt, she strengthens her spirit. Every time she listens to her inner wisdom instead of the critic in her head, she affirms her worth. Over time, the woman who once questioned every step now walks with grounded certainty. She's not fearless, but she is faithful. She does not deny the presence of uncertainty, but she refuses to let it control her destiny. Letting go of self-doubt is not about arrogance or pretending to have all the answers. It is about choosing to believe that you are guided, that you are capable, that you are equipped for the journey placed before you. It is about no longer apologizing for existing, no longer asking for permission to shine, no longer lowering your voice when you are meant to speak truth. The more you release doubt, the more room you create for clarity, for creativity, and for courage. When self-doubt falls away, your energy changes. You carry yourself differently. People sense the certainty in your presence, opportunity. Ties begin to align with your confidence. And more importantly, you no longer betray yourself. You no longer silence your intuition to appease fear. You no longer delay your growth waiting for a perfect moment that never comes. You move, you act, you rise, and through that rising you become unshakable. The spiritually awake woman knows her worth is not something to be proven, it is something to be lived. She is not defined by what doubt once told her. She is defined by the power she now embraces. And in the space where hesitation once lived, she builds faith, trust, and unstoppable momentum. The spiritually awake woman also begins to release the need for approval. For too long, she may have measured her worth through the eyes of others, adjusting her choices, her words, even her dreams to avoid judgment or rejection. The desire to be accepted can be intoxicating, but it is also imprisoning. It creates a life built on performance rather than authenticity, and it leaves the soul starve. For true freedom. When awakening begins, she realizes that the constant chase for approval is a trap that drains her power and silences her truth. Approval may feel comforting in the moment, but it is always temporary. It is conditional, fragile, and dependent on the shifting opinions of those around you. One day it is given, the next day it is withdrawn. To build your identity on something so unstable is to live in constant insecurity. But the spiritually awake woman understands that real validation does not come from applause, but from alignment. It is not found in being everything to everyone, but in being honest with herself. And the moment she begins to live by her own standards, the grip of approval starts to dissolve. This release is not easy. The fear of disapproval runs deep, especially in a world that rewards conformity and punishes difference. Yet she learns that her value does not decrease when someone disagrees with her. Her truth does not vanish when someone criticizes her. Her worth does not depend on who approves of her choices. This realization is liberation. It is the moment when she understands that every yes to others that betrays her own soul is a no to her highest self. And so, she slowly begins to reverse the pattern. She says yes to what strengthens her, even if it is unpopular. She says no to what drains her, even if it disappoints others. With every boundary she sets, she reclaims a piece of her power. With every decision guided by intuition rather than fear of rejection, she becomes more unshakable. The approval she once sought from the outside begins to rise from within. It takes the form of self-respect, inner peace, and unbreakable confidence. She no longer needs to beg for love, because she is rooted in love for herself. She no longer fears rejection, because she knows that what is meant for her will never require her to betray her truth to keep it. When the need for approval fades, a new energy emerges. Her presence becomes magnetic, not because she is trying to please, but because she radiates authenticity. She is no longer pulled in every direction by the expectations of others. She is centered, clear, and courageous. The spiritually awake woman does not live for applause, she lives for alignment. And in that alignment, she finds the only approval that truly matters, the approval of her own soul. Another weight that falls away is the fear of loneliness. For much of life, the thought of being alone can feel unbearable, as if silence itself is a punishment. The mind tells you that solitude means rejection, that it means you are unloved, that it means you are forgotten. But when a woman begins to awaken spiritually, she realizes that loneliness is not the enemy she once believed it to be. She discovers that the silence she feared is actually the doorway to her deepest strength. What once felt like emptiness begins to feel like sacred space, a place where she can hear her own soul without distraction. The truth is that loneliness is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of people, it is the absence of connection with yourself. When you are disconnected from your inner world, no amount of company can fill the void. But when you reconnect with your essence, solitude becomes healing. It is in stillness that clarity rises. It is in silence that wisdom speaks. It is in quiet moments alone that the spirit expands, free from the noise of the world and the demands of others. The spiritually awake woman begins to cherish these moments, not as a punishment, but as nourishment. This shift transforms her entire life. She no longer clings to relationships out of fear of being left behind. She no longer accepts toxic company just to avoid the feeling of emptiness. She no longer chases validation through constant interaction. Instead, she learns to sit with herself, to breathe with herself, to grow with herself. In that sacred space, she discovers her own strength. She realizes she was never truly alone. She was simply being called to reconnect with the divine presence within. Releasing the fear of loneliness also unlocks freedom and love. When you no longer fear being alone, you choose relationships from strength, not desperation. You are no longer willing to accept less than you deserve. You are no longer afraid to walk away when something diminishes your light. You become unshakable, because your happiness no longer depends on anyone else's presence. You carry it within you, and that makes you whole. The woman who embraces solitude becomes magnetic. Her energy is calm, her presence steady, her spirit unafraid. She radiates peace because she is no longer running from herself. And in that peace, she attracts connections that are pure, uplifting, and aligned with her truth. The fear of loneliness dissolves when you realize that silence is not a void but a sanctuary. Alone does not mean empty. Alone means full of possibility, full of discovery, full of power waiting to be claimed. When a spiritually awake woman surrenders to solitude, she stops fearing it. She begins to thrive in it. And in that thriving, she becomes whole, complete, and unshakable in her own presence. When a woman awakens spiritually, she also begins to let go of the habit of comparison. For too long, she may have measured her worth against the lives of others, watching their successes, their beauty, their possessions, and silently questioning her own path. Comparison plants seeds of insecurity, convincing her that she is behind, that she is lacking, that she is somehow less than the image she sees. But spiritual awakening opens her eyes to the truth that no two souls are meant to walk the same journey. Each path is unique, each purpose distinct, and to compare them is to dishonor the divine design that makes her who she is. The danger of comparison is that it blinds you to your own progress. It tells you that no matter what you achieve, it is never enough because someone else seems further ahead. It keeps you chasing illusions, running after someone else's timeline, while neglecting the sacred beauty of your own growth. The spiritually awake woman begins to notice how comparison robs her of joy. She realizes that every time she looks outward to measure her worth, she abandons the inner work that is calling her forward. Slowly, she stops feeding that cycle. She turns inward, choosing gratitude over envy, presence over distraction, and self-respect over competition. This shift is powerful. When she no longer compares, she finally sees herself clearly. She notices the progress she once ignored. She honors the lessons that shaped her. She celebrates the strengths that set her apart. She begins to understand that her timing is not late, her journey is not flawed, and her growth is not inferior. It is simply hers, unfolding exactly as it was meant to. In that realization, she finds peace, because she no longer feels the pressure to prove herself in a race that never exists. Ted. Letting go of comparison also frees her energy. The time and focus once wasted on other people's lives are now poured into her own expansion. She invests in her healing, her dreams, her purpose. She shifts from watching to creating, from envying to building, from doubting to rising. And as she does, her confidence grows, her clarity sharpens, and her spirit begins to flourish. The beauty of this release is that it allows authentic connection. When you are no longer competing with others in your mind, you are free to celebrate them without resentment. You are free to honor their success without diminishing your own. You are free to see that their light does not dim yours, and your light does not threaten theirs. This creates space for true sisterhood, true support, and true unity. The spiritually awake woman does not measure her worth in comparison to another. She measures it by her alignment with her soul. She knows she was not created to be a copy, but a masterpiece. And in each moment she fully embraces her uniqueness. Comparison loses all power over her. Another release that defines the spiritually awake woman is her decision to stop overgiving. For years, she may have poured herself into others, constantly meeting their needs while neglecting her own. She may have believed that sacrifice was the highest form of love, that her worth was tied to how much she could give away. But in truth, overgiving is often a disguised form of self-abandonment. It drains her energy, depletes her spirit, and leaves her empty, wondering why she feels unseen and unappreciated. Awakening brings clarity, and with clarity comes the realization that love cannot thrive when it comes at the expense of the self. The spiritually awake woman begins to see that giving without balance is not generosity, it is exhaustion. She realizes that when she constantly says yes to everyone else, she is silently saying no to herself, and every unspoken no to herself builds into resentment fatigue. Go and quiet suffering. Slowly she begins to shift. She starts to recognize that her energy is sacred, her time is valuable, and her heart is not an endless resource to be taken for granted. She learns that setting boundaries is not selfish, it is self-respect. This shift is profound. For the first time, she understands that love given from an empty cup is not love at all. True giving flows from overflow, from abundance, from a place where her own needs are honored first. By caring for herself, she ensures that when she gives, it is pure, intentional, and sustainable. The quality of her giving rises even as the quantity lessens. She no longer gives out of guilt, obligation, or fear of rejection. She gives out of genuine choice, and that makes her love more powerful than ever. Letting go of overgiving also transforms her relationships. Those who only took advantage of her generosity fall away because they no longer benefit from her lack of boundaries. At first, this can feel painful, but with time, it reveals who truly values her. The people who remain are those who respect her limits, honor her energy, and give back with the same care she offers. She realizes that healthy love is never one-sided. It is not built on sacrifice alone, but on balance, respect, and mutual nourishment. This release teaches her one of the most important truths of awakening. She is worthy of receiving as much as she gives. She deserves rest, kindness, attention, and support. She deserves relationships that fill her instead of draining her. She deserves to be seen not only for what she provides, but for who she is. And when she finally embraces this truth, she no longer fears that saying no will make her less valuable. She understands that her value is never in how much she gave away, but in the light she carries within. By protecting that light, she ensures it can never be extinguished. The spiritually awake woman also learns to release her attachment to the past. So much of life can be spent replaying old wounds, holding on to regrets, or reliving moments that no longer exist. The mind clings to what was, believing that somehow revisiting the pain will change it, that somehow staying tied to yesterday will protect against tomorrow. But the truth is that carrying the past only weighs the soul down. It keeps the heart chained to experiences that can no longer be undone, and it robs the present of its power. Awakening opens her eyes to the reality that freedom is found not in holding tighter, but in letting go. The past is a teacher, not a prison. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every disappointment contains wisdom. But wisdom can only be accessed when the pain is released. When she awakens, she begins to see that her scars are not meant to define her, but to guide her. She no longer resists what happened, nor does she pretend it never occurred. Instead, she chooses to learn from it, to honor the lessons, and then to lay the weight down so she can move forward. Unburdened. Forgiveness becomes the key. Sometimes forgiveness of others, sometimes forgiveness of herself, but always the act of releasing what no longer serves her soul. This release is not about weakness, it is about strength. It takes courage to face the memories that have haunted her. It takes resilience to stop blaming, stop replaying, and stop feeding the cycle of pain. It takes deep self-love to finally say, I will not let my past dictate my future. The spiritually awake woman chooses to live in the present because she understands that the present is where transformation happens, where healing begins, and where her power truly resides. Letting go of the past also changes how she views her identity. She no longer sees herself as the sum of her failures or the victim of her wounds. She begins to recognize herself as someone who has endured, who has grown, who has risen despite everything. The story of her past becomes evidence of her strength, not proof of her weakness. And as she embraces this truth, she steps into the present moment with confidence, no longer haunted by what she cannot change. The gift of releasing the past is freedom. It is the ability to create without being held back by old patterns. It is the courage to love without carrying forward old fears. It is the peace of knowing that what is behind her does not define what is ahead. The spiritually awake woman walks with lighter steps because she is no longer dragging the weight of yesterday. She knows the past shaped her, but it does not bind her. She is free, and in that freedom, she creates a future unclouded by the shadows of what once was. Silence becomes one of her greatest strengths. In a world that constantly demands noise, reaction, and explanation, she learns the profound power of restraint. Not every thought deserves to be spoken, not every attack deserves a response, and not every moment requires her energy. Silence is not emptiness, it is alignment. It is the calm confidence of knowing that truth does not need to shout. When she chooses silence, she chooses control over her emotions, mastery over her impulses, and protection of her inner peace. The awakened woman understands that silence can be louder than words, sharper than anger, and more commanding than arguments. Through silence, she gains clarity. Words often cloud the mind, filling space with opinions, defenses, or reactions that drain strength. But when she holds her silence, she creates space to observe, to think, and to understand with deeper wisdom. She begins to notice what others reveal about themselves without her needing to speak. She watches patterns, intentions, and energies unfold in front of her. Silence grants her the power to see the truth beneath appearances, and this awareness shields her from manipulation and confusion. Silence also protects her energy. Every time she refuses to argue with ignorance, every time she resists being provoked into conflict, she conserves her power. She no longer wastes herself on proving, defending, or persuading those who cannot or will not understand. Instead, she redirects that energy toward growth, healing, and creation. Silence is her boundary, her way of saying that her peace is more valuable than winning an argument. It is a declaration that her energy will not be spent on battles unworthy of her soul. This silence is not passive, it is intentional. It is not about suppression, but about choosing what deserves expression. She knows when to speak and when to remain still. She learns that her words carry more weight when they are rare, deliberate, and purposeful. People notice when she speaks less, but with more depth. They listen when she chooses her moment because her silence has already commanded respect. In this way, silence becomes her shield and her sword, protecting her from chaos while amplifying her strength when she finally decides to speak. The spiritually awake woman understands that silence is healing. It is the quiet space where the soul breathes, where the heart recalibrates, where the spirit reconnects with its source. In silence, she reclaims herself. She hears her intuition more clearly, she feels her emotions without distortion, and she accesses the wisdom that only stillness can reveal. Silence is not loneliness, it is power. It is the sanctuary that keeps her grounded when the world tries to pull her apart. She does not fear silence anymore. She embraces it as her ally, her teacher, and her unshakable strength. Strength is not measured by how loudly she fights, but by how steadily she endures. The awakened woman learns that resilience is built in silence, in the quiet choices that no one sees, in the moments where she refuses to break under pressure. She understands that true power is not explosive, it is consistent. It is the discipline to rise each morning with determination, to hold her boundaries with grace, and to continue moving forward even when the world underestimates her. Shh. She no longer seeks recognition for her endurance. She knows that her strength is self-evident, and the proof lies in her unshakable stability. She refuses to allow external chaos to dictate her internal state. While others may be consumed by fear, anger, or distraction, she anchors herself in balance. This emotional control is not repression, it is wisdom. She has learned that reacting to everything gives her power away, but responding with intention multiplies it. She practices patience when provoked, clarity when confused, and calmness when others are in turmoil. This composure disarms negativity and elevates her presence, making her unmovable in the face of uncertainty. Her energy becomes a force that influences the environment around her, rather than being shaped by it. Her strength also lies in her ability to let go. She does not cling to what drains her, nor does she chase after what resists her. She releases people, habits, and situations that no longer serve her growth, not with bitterness but with acceptance. Letting go is not weakness, it is freedom. She has realized that holding on to what is misaligned only delays her destiny. Each release creates space for something greater, and each surrender becomes an act of courage that expands her life. She does not fear endings because she has faith in her own rebirth. This strength radiates in her presence. People feel it without her needing to display it. It is not in how loud she speaks, but in how deeply she listens. Not in how forcefully she acts, but in how purposefully she moves. Her confidence is quiet, yet undeniable. Rooted not in approval, but in self-mastery. She no longer seeks validation from others to confirm her worth. She has already validated herself through the way she chooses to live, the way she chooses to rise, and the way she chooses to honor her truth. The awakened woman embodies strength that is soft yet unyielding. She can bend without breaking, feel without crumbling, and love without loss. In herself. Her resilience is not a shield against life, but a flow with it. She no longer resists challenges, she transforms them. She no longer fears pain, she learns from it. She no longer doubts her capacity, she proves it through action. This strength is her foundation, her identity, and her eternal reminder that she is unshakable. Power grows stronger when she learns the art of silence. The awakened woman no longer feels the urge to explain herself to everyone, to justify her decisions, or to argue with those who cannot understand her vision. She realizes that not all battles deserve her energy and not all opinions deserve her attention. Her silence is not emptiness, it is strategy. It is the wisdom of knowing that her truth does not require validation and her path does not need approval. In silence, she protects her peace, conserves her energy, and keeps her focus sharp on what truly matters. This silence is not weakness, it is strength in its purest form. She understands the words can often be wasted, but silence has the power to speak volumes. When she chooses not to engage in negativity, she communicates that her spirit is above it. When she withholds unnecessary explanations, she shows that her confidence is unwavering. When she listens more than she speaks, she gains insight others miss. In silence, she observes patterns, reads energy, and gathers understanding. This makes her not only stronger but wiser, for she no longer reacts to noise, she rises above it. Through silence, she has mastered the ability to remain untouchable. People may provoke her, situations may test her, but she refuses to give away her power through reckless words or emotional outbursts. She knows that dignity is preserved when silence is chosen over pointless conflict. She saves her voice for what matters, and when she finally speaks, her words carry weight because they are rare, deliberate, and infused with clarity. Her silence gives her authority, for it reveals that she is not controlled by impulse, but guided by intention. silence also becomes her sanctuary. It is in these moments of quiet where she reconnects with herself, where she hears her intuition clearly, where she feels the presence of her higher self guiding her forward. She does not drown out this inner voice with constant noise or distractions. Instead, she allows silence to cleanse her, to realign her, to sharpen her sense of purpose. She realizes that silence is not empty, it is full of answers, full of clarity, full of power waiting to be accessed. Those who misunderstand her silence may mistake it for indifference, but she knows the truth. Her silence is not avoidance, it is protection. It is her refusal to waste sacred energy on what does not uplift her soul. It is her way of choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over argument, and wisdom over impulse. She walks away without resentment, disengages without bitterness, and stays silent without regret. This is the kind of power that cannot be shaken. The kind of strength that cannot be stolen. Silence has become her weapon, her shield, and her crown. There comes a time when she no longer allows guilt to dictate her choices. The awakened woman realizes that guilt is often a chain used to control, a subtle force that convinces her to carry burdens that are not hers to bear. She begins to see how often guilt has disguised itself as responsibility, how often it has silenced her needs in order to please others, and how often it has kept her small when she was born to expand. She decides that her life is too sacred to be lived under the shadow of false obligations. Letting go of guilt does not make her selfish, it makes her free. She understands that true love cannot be built on guilt. If someone must manipulate her emotions to keep her close, then that bond is already broken. She refuses to remain where her presence is demanded but not respected. She knows that guilt is not proof of compassion, but a sign of misaligned boundaries. When she releases guilt, she chooses authenticity over performance. She chooses to act out of genuine care, not out of fear of being judged. This shift gives her a new kind of strength, a strength rooted in integrity rather than pressure. Every time she breaks free from guilt, she rises higher. She no longer apologizes for protecting her peace. She does not feel guilty for needing rest, for saying no, for prioritizing her healing, or for walking away from what harms her. These are not acts of cruelty, but acts of courage. She knows that a woman cannot pour from an empty cup, and that guilt has drained her long enough. Releasing guilt allows her to refill her spirit, to live with honesty, and to move in alignment with her higher purpose. The freedom from guilt transforms how she views herself. Instead of carrying shame for not meeting impossible expectations, she begins to honor herself for surviving, for trying, for choosing. She learns to replace self-criticism with self-compassion, to see mistakes as lessons, and to forgive herself for not being perfect. She realizes that perfection was never required of her, authenticity was. By releasing guilt, she gives herself permission to grow without fear, to experiment without shame, and to rise without asking permission. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, walking in truth without being bound by the weight of regret. Guilt loses its grip when she understands that her worth is not measured by how much she suffers for others. Her worth is inherent, unshakable, and divine. She does not need to sacrifice herself to be valued. She does not need to carry pain to prove love. She does not need to shrink to make others comfortable. By letting go of guilt, she finally steps into her power fully. Her energy becomes lighter, her spirit becomes clearer, and her heart becomes fearless. Guilt no longer rules her. Freedom does. Fear no longer commands her steps because the awakened woman recognizes it for what it truly is, an illusion designed to keep her small. She begins to understand that fear thrives in uncertainty, feeding on her imagination, magnifying shadows until they look like walls. But when she confronts fear with courage, those walls dissolve into smoke. She realizes that most of what she once feared never actually existed. It was the projection of her doubts, the echo of old voices telling her she could not rise. With clarity, she decides to stop giving her power to fear, because fear has never been her protector, only her jailer. She embraces discomfort as proof that she is moving forward. What once made her retreat now becomes her signal to advance. She sees that fear is not a sign to stop, but a sign that she is stepping beyond her limits. Growth is always uncomfortable, and freedom is always on the other side of fear. Each time she acts despite trembling, each time she refuses to let fear silence her, she builds a new layer of strength. Her confidence grows not because fear disappears, pairs, but because she learns to walk through it. The awakened woman trains her mind to see fear as a teacher rather than an enemy. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" she begins to ask, "What if I thrive?" Instead of imagining everything that could go wrong, she envisions everything that could go right. This mental shift transforms fear into fuel, turning anxiety into anticipation, hesitation into momentum. She stops avoiding risk and begins embracing possibility, because she knows that the life she desires cannot be reached while standing safely in the comfort zone. She also refuses to carry fears that do not belong to her. Society may try to instill fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being too bold, too ambitious, too unapologetic, but she understands that these are not her fears. They are the insecurities of others projected onto her. She no longer bows to them. Instead, she stands rooted in her truth, unafraid of being misunderstood, unafraid of being different, unafraid of being seen in her full light. Fear cannot control a woman who has chosen authenticity over approval. With every step forward, she replaces fear with faith. Faith in herself, faith in her vision, faith in the unseen forces guiding her path. She does not need certainty to move, she only needs trust. Fear once kept her silent, hidden, hesitant. Now it is powerless against her. She has realized that fear is not a barrier but a doorway, and walking through it is the only way to claim her destiny. She no longer negotiates with fear. She rises above it, she walks through it, and she conquers it with grace. The awakened woman no longer measures herself by comparison, because she understands that comparison is poison to the soul.